Let's start a conversation about healthy weight for life. Obviously, we're looking around and you can see, why are we so overweight? We're wondering what is causing this obesity epidemic. Well, it's because there's many ways that diets fail. And you may ask, how do they fail us? Well, one of the most common obstacles that people face that they may not know about is detoxification. Other reasons, they go to appetite suppressants, or they may think it's important to just not eat as much and really starve themselves. And really the main focus when it boils down to the one piece is that we're really doing weight loss to lose fat instead of losing muscle. What does that mean? It means that we really need to shift our focus from being light to being lean, and that's one of the tricks. So let's talk about these in detail. In order to really understand how we get healthy weight for life, you need to understand these two terms called inflammation and detoxification. Let's put it all into context, okay? We're backing it up another step. If we look around, you can see that our shapes are changing over time. Obesity didn't used to be as big a problem as it is now. We used to not have the epidemic of children being overweight, let alone our adults being overweight. And many of us are believing that the reason why we're evolving into this different shape is because we're making different choices as compared to our ancestors. We used to make better choices about how we ate, how we moved, and how we slept, how we managed our stress. These things are shifting the way our body is working, and we're seeing that on data, as we see here with the Center for Disease Control. What they decided to do was take a map and look at the rates of obesity throughout the US. So when they started tracking way back in 1985, the obesity epidemic was just starting. So you can see there are many states, which are in white, that there wasn't even any data for. They weren't tracking the rates of obesity in the adults there. And just to put it into a perspective, a 5'4" adult who had 30 extra pounds of weight on them would be considered obese, just to kind of get a sense of what obese really means. So you can see here that there's a color code or a color bar at the bottom. So as the number or percentage of adults that are obese goes up, the color goes from these cool blue tones up to the warm and hot red and orange tones. Now let's talk about how that makes a difference over time. Look at these maps. Now we're comparing 1990 to 1999 and then 2009. You can see an obvious trend. You see how states have slowly over time, actually not slowly, I would call this quick. I mean, in a matter of 20 years, we are seeing obesity increase amongst adults. And if we were to take a map for kids, it would look very similar. And why? Because in the homes, we're making similar choices. So those choices are affecting all ages. So why is this a big deal to all of us in healthcare, and why should it be a big deal to you? Well, there is this rise of chronic disease epidemics, meaning things that are going to stick with you if you don't change your choices. What are these risks that we really need to understand are rising? Well, you might be noticing them yourselves already. Things like heart disease. Did you ever think that you would get to know people who are having heart attacks in their 40s and think that's kind of normal or not a shock to you? How about diabetes? We're seeing full onset type 2 diabetes in teenagers. That was supposed to never happen to them until they were seniors, based on the lifestyles we had even 50 years ago. How about cancer? We used to think that cancer was also for seniors, but now more and more we see young adults with cancer popping up. Last but certainly not least is arthritis and many other symptoms that we may not die from necessarily, but they surely hinder our quality of life. So these chronic disease epidemics, you might wonder, why are they here? And so many people wonder, oh, why do I have this problem? And the thing that we hear over and over is that people are thinking it just runs in the family. What does that mean? Oh, that it's just in our genes. But here's the deal. All this stuff is changing in the last 20 years, but our genes haven't changed for thousands of years. So how can we pin everything on our genes or our family history? We can't. What's really happening is our unhealthy lifestyles are forcing changes in our bodies. And these diseases that are listed are really obesity-related diseases. So I don't mean to say that genes are not important, because your genes load the gun, but it is your poor lifestyle that could be pulling the trigger on whatever disease or symptoms that you seem to have for a long time. Chronic disease, chronic symptom, that's what I mean. And you know what? Research and popular media is catching on to this as well. They understand the word inflammation, and they know and they call it the secret killer. Not only is it linked to things like heart attacks, cancer, Alzheimer's, and arthritis, but the thing about it that's really seductive and problematic is that it's silent. It's kind of like so many other symptoms that people have. If you don't feel it, you don't know you have a problem. So this inflammation is the fuel for so many other long-term diseases that people have. Whether it's a disease or it's a symptom, that inflammation fuels it. So hopefully you're asking the question, how do I get rid of inflammation? Well, it's to understand this concept of debt. You know, when we make unhealthy choices, understand that we're going to pay a debt, pay a price for those choices. It's a debt that we owe our body. So whether we're overweight or obese, we do need to understand we carry this debt to our body when we start creating this imbalance. So how do we create imbalance or debt? Well, many of the foods and the way we eat inflame our body or cause inflammation. So we eat the wrong foods, the more artificial, processed, preserved they are, if they have a lot of ingredients in them that we don't need, like sugar, fat, salt, if they've been engineered or modified so that what they were originally is nothing like the tomato you might be eating now, this causes inflammation in the body. Many of the foods have now started triggering allergies and sensitivities, and to top it all off, we eat way too much of them compared to the way we used to eat, and we shovel them down at times in our times of stress. We're creating a debt to our body, an inflammatory debt. The other thing is our environment parallels our food choices. Think of all the things that our environment has in it that it didn't even have 50 to 100 years ago. Again, we cannot act like there isn't a price we must pay for being exposed to those things. And even though they may not take you down in a day or two, that long-term daily exposure racks up debt that your body will then have to pay the price for. So what happens next? I'm talking about all this doom and gloom with inflammation and all this garbage that we kind of are exposed to through our food, our stress, our environment. Well, luckily the body has a mechanism to get the garbage out. But here's the problem. If we don't give the body what it needs to get the garbage out, we end up with a garbage jam. And so here is the scientific explanation of how it all goes. Inflammation, as we talked about, is actually an alarm. It's an alarm set off by your body's immune system. And remember, your immune system is kind of like your body's security system. So if it sees like an infection, or if you injure yourself, or if there's a big grizzly bear that's coming to attack you, that immune system says, hey, big problem in the house. Let's turn on the alarm. And the body goes into survival mode. And one of the things it does in survival mode is it likes to store fat. Well, here's the deal. We don't suffer from as many infections like tuberculosis like we used to 100 years ago. We don't get injured and then just stay injured. We actually get to go get that corrected by surgery. And grizzly bears and tigers don't affect us every single day. But things like our cell phones and computers and our kids' soccer schedules, these kinds of things really create this do or die stress in us. And that turns on that inflammation alarm. And what about the food that we eat? It looks so different from what the earth had actually created. And so guess what? That turns on an alarm every single time we eat it. And what about our environment? We talked about all the things that may be toxic, but there are many things we apply on our skin and put in our mouth that have preservatives and chemicals that our body again looks at as enemy, as potential threat. And then we have belly fat, this slowly encroaching kind of thing on our system that the body and immune system say, hey, it doesn't make sense why this thing is trying to take over. Let's render an attack. So again, when any of these things are exposed to that immune system, it turns on that inflammation alarm and you get this production of garbage. So bear with me, we're getting to the point here. When that garbage builds up over time, you have this overflowing garbage can. And as I said, there's a way to get rid of the garbage. So just like a factory, the body will kind of sort or filter your garbage. And if it dissolves in fat, it's gonna go to the liver, okay? So fat-soluble toxins or garbage go to the liver. But if it dissolves in water, it goes to the colon, the kidney, or the skin. Now you know the guys on the right. You know them because you know that there's holes to the outside for you to poop, to pee, and sweat. And so that's all well and good. If you're drinking water, eating a lot of fiber, you're exercising, you're helpful in getting that body to take that garbage out. Now your liver does not have a hole to the outside. And so what it needs are a lot of nutrients to be able to convert its garbage into a form that can then dissolve in water. And then the colon, kidney, and skin can then get it out. So are you thinking, maybe I might not be drinking enough water, or maybe I'm not eating enough plants to be able to give my liver what it needs to detoxify. Maybe I'm not moving as much to be able to sweat my garbage out. So could your trash cans be too full? That could be the reason why you're not losing weight. You have to have empty trash cans. Otherwise, you end up with this garbage jam, if you will. And so it's that imbalance, that debt that you still have in the bank account with all this garbage that you may have created. So lesson number one, why most diets fail? They don't address the detoxification burden or the garbage burden that you've created. Now, here's the next thing that we want to talk about as we bring in the big concept of lifelong weight loss. Most diets don't teach us how to live balanced. They kind of are yo-yo-like. They tell you to live like this for a little bit, you lose your weight, and then you go back to sometimes your old ways. And so the lifelong trick for having healthy weight is to make sure you get that garbage out from all your past debts, but then you've got to make sure you don't incur new debt. And so we have to reduce ways of bringing new garbage in. And that's what we're going to focus in on. Now, one of the ways that many of us decide to try to lose weight may be with appetite suppressants, or we might think it's just a calorie equation. Here's the problem. If all we do is restrict calories and down to an unhealthy level, we actually will promote muscle loss and we won't have all those nutrients we need to get the body to clean up. So let's specifically talk about appetite suppressants and starvation. First, appetite suppressants. People are interested sometimes in the quick fix. Being overweight or obese can be frustrating, especially knowing that it causes so many other problems. And so that's a perceived benefit that, oh, just get me a pill, it'll control my appetite. But here's the problem. When you use those appetite suppressants, and especially when they're paired up with a very, very low calorie diet, your body says, where's the food? Where's my energy source? And it will actually start using your own muscle for food. You will actually catabolize. You will eat your own muscle. That is not healthy. And so what we really need to understand is people who have blood pressure issues, heart disease issues, or people who actually just want to keep weight off for life, appetite suppressants are potentially a real risk. They should not be considered that lifelong solution. So let's see how many times we're fooled into thinking that we've had healthy weight loss. You see, what happens is that when we look at our scale, all we see is a total number if it went up or down. But we don't know when the number goes down, did we actually lose fat? Or could we have inadvertently and dangerously lost muscle? And what I'm hoping that you're getting from me is that when we starve our bodies or when we use appetite suppressants, we are losing muscle, and muscle is what we absolutely need to keep the weight off for life. It's not a good long-term solution. So there's a big difference between muscle loss and fat loss. You see, when you lose muscle, you are losing your metabolic power. You are losing your fat burning power because it burns calories at a much higher speed, 5 times as much. And so the fact is is that because muscle burns more fat, that's what's going to keep your weight healthy for life. And here's a picture to just drive home the point. We don't want to be just light. We want to be lean. If you look at the picture on your left-hand side, you see that there is this big circle of white lining around the muscle. This is kind of a cross-section of a thigh. And you see that that layer of fat, that I'm going to teach you is what causes inflammation. This person and the other person on the right may look the same on the outside, but you see how much more muscle the person on the right has? So that person is lean and that person is burning fat, whereas the person on the left, through maybe appetite suppressants or starvation or eating the wrong foods, is storing fat. Not good for healthy weight long term. Because not only do you not have health from calorie burn, but that extra fat is fueling inflammation. You remember that word? Inflammation is what fuels all other diseases that affect so many Americans and people across the globe. So you might be asking me, how do I burn fat versus store fat? Well, it's quite simple. One of the ways that you can be so powerful in this is to manage your blood sugar. So here's a diagram, and here's the simplicity of it. If your blood sugar goes too high, you store fat. If it drops too low, you store fat. And there is this Goldilocks phenomenon where in the middle, where it's just right, you burn fat. So when you eat foods that are keeping you in that middle zone, you're burning fat all day long. So what you need to know is that all carbohydrates are not created equal. When we're burning sugar/carbs, we need to know that there's good ones and bad ones. So these good carbs that I alluded to, they slowly get digested in your system and they release their blood sugar slow, and there's not so many of them, as you can see with this diagram with the apple. Now let's compare that to a bad carb, like a piece of white bread or maybe some sort of cereal. Now I have a sugary cereal here, but you see how it's all dropping out a bunch of sugar and the speed of the drop is really high? That's what I call a sugar bomb. So foods that are bad carbohydrates tend to release sugar quick, and they tend to release a lot of sugar. So the big lesson is that bad carbohydrates will cause fat gain, right? Let me show you how that happens. When we choose foods like white potatoes or jelly beans, we actually cause our blood sugar to spike. We call that a high glycemic food. Conversely, if you decide just to make a simple switch and eat a sweet potato, this sweet potato is low glycemic. It does not have that same sugar bomb effect. And so this is how it plays out day in and day out based on your choices. Let's say you had a bowl of cereal, and let me tell you, a lot of those healthy cereals actually are high glycemic. So when you eat that, your blood sugar spikes up. You see it's gone up into the wrong zone. So what happens? It turns on an alarm. Insulin comes flooding out and it says, whoa, we can't have you up here. Tells your body, let's get inflamed, let's store some fat, and then it starts to cause your blood sugar to drop. But it drops it too low. And then your body says, whoa, 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 we've gone on the other side. Makes you crave food because it doesn't want you to be too low and faint. So what do? You have a healthy granola bar maybe, or one of those fruity yogurts. And so you think you're being healthy, but that too may be high glycemic. And so what happens? Your blood sugar spikes high and quick because you ate high glycemic. Alarm goes off, insulin gets dumped, you store some fat, and then guess what? Blood sugar plummets. Plummets again to where the craving starts. But this time you might say, oh, I don't have time for a snack. And so guess what happens? The craving increases. But your body is in an emergency state here. It knows that if it doesn't get fuel, you are going to pass out, get jittery, get the shakes, feel sick to your stomach. So guess what? Liver comes to the rescue. And that liver dumps a bunch of emergency sugar into your bloodstream. And it's doing that to protect you from fainting. But it causes that spike again. Or you may think, I've been so good, let me have a little candy bar. And that makes you, again, spike up the blood sugar, whether it's your liver or that candy bar. You get that spike, the alarm, and so on and so forth. So here's the problem. You're constantly in the store fat zones. You see, what happens is that when you eat foods that cause your blood sugar to spike and crash, you cause fat storage. And you remember, fat storage causes inflammation. And if you have inflammation ongoing or chronic, as we say in medicine, that is what leads to so many diseases that we had shown. So here's the tips, final tips to kind of really get in the choices that we need to make to pay our debts off and keep them out. So you want to eat whole, unprocessed foods. The closer to the earth or the closer to the way the food originally came, the better. If your great-grandmother would not recognize the food, do not eat it. Try to minimize bad carbohydrates and grains and gluten in general. Most of the stuff that's out there tends to be enriched and bleached and processed. Keep it low or get it out. When you're eating your fruits and vegetables, be sure to get the rainbow of colors, because all of those colors are important for your liver to detoxify, and they're important for all other parts of your body to work well. So get fruits and vegetables close to the earth and get plenty of colors every day if you can. Eat good fats. Fat is not bad, but the right kinds of fats are essential. So eating nuts and seeds and certain fish like salmon and mackerel and having good healthy oils as part of a balanced diet has been shown to be very helpful for healthy weight for life. And of course, let's not starve. Don't starve all day and then inhale a big dinner and then go to bed. It's not natural. It's not healthy. You want to space out your meals. And like I talked about, let's not be so stressed when we're eating, because your mindset actually turns on inflammation. If you're stressed while you're eating, you are going to more likely store it as fat. So try to be relaxed. Slow down, turn off the TV, stop looking at your cell phone when you're eating, and just be present. Because here's the deal. Everything I've talked about is going to help you, but nothing will work unless you do. And so the issue really is for most of us, not that we don't know what to do, but how do we get there? And we may think it's a matter of willpower, but really it's a matter of want power. How much do you want healthy weight? How can you help yourself get better? Ask your questions. Figure out which foods could be good for you or bad for you. Start resolving your debt. Make sure that when you're going for healthy weight, that you're going to be lean, because you want to be healthy inside and out and keep up these great habits to make it lifelong. I am so proud that all of us are making efforts to be healthier. We recognize that it's a change that needs to come about so that ourselves, our children, and future generations have an opportunity to be happy and healthy in the best of ways. Take care and good luck.